All right, so we're going to make the abstract image. So let's get right to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to open that picture that I took. The one that I liked was the metal one because didn't take very great ones here. So I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. All right, here it is. Okay, so if you remember, the first thing we want to do is this. We want to, this is going to be annoying. Let me see if I can move this over. Oh, good. Okay. Usually we do two things, right? One, we duplicate the image so that we have the original unedited. And then the other thing we do is we crop. Now, in this case, so actually let's do that. So I'm going to duplicate this image. So I'm going to grab this and just hit Control J to duplicate, all right? And I'm just going to rename this one Original. Okay. And this one will be Extra Crispy. Okay. So that's obviously just going to be the edited one, we're going to say. All right. So we have the original and that. So I'm just going to grab the original and just lock it again. So I select it, hit the little lock here. And then the Extra Crispy one. All I want to do is just get rid of this here because you can see there's a little bit of text there that I'm not like super about. So that should be a relatively easy fix. So I'm just going to basically fix, there's a little nuck there as well. So I'm just going to try and fix these things. So for this, I'm just going to use the Polygonal Lasso like this. Let's see, get a little bit closer here, like that. Like that, double click. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do Edit, Fill. And make sure it's content aware, hit OK. And it's gone. All right, so Control D. Doesn't look great. I probably would do it by hand, but for the sake of time, we're going to call that good. All right. Now right here, you can see I have this little pooper scooper here. So I'm just going to go to the spot healing brush here, and I'm just gonna get rid of that guy. And then there's this little thing here that I'm not like a big fan of. Yeah, just a little bit more. Okay, good. And I think there's a little dot there. I don't know. But if you need to like get rid of a little something, just don't go too nuts because obviously, just won't look good. Okay, so I get rid of all the little whoopity whoops there. And then what I need to do next, obviously, is just to crop it. Okay, so I just want to get rid of those on this this edited one. So we're going to go to the crop tool. Make it 6x9 or 9x6. Doesn't really matter. One thing you might want to use or to deal with is this. You can choose the overlay. So you might have, a lot of times this one's the default. It's not even showing it. Oh, because I have it, always show, auto show. Let's see if it's going to, there you go. It'll show this little overlay here, which you may or may not like. I generally would go with the rule of thirds one. So it'll cut into the thirds. I don't know. I don't think we've talked about the rule of thirds, but basically you want your areas of interest to be on the thirds. But I don't like them at all, so I just do never show overlay. I don't really find it that super helpful. Okay, so obviously I need to do this. But one of the things that you can do as well with this that you may or may not know is this. You can actually rotate this. Now, I know before we used that straighten tool, but I'm looking at this, and this composition could be a little bit better if it was just a little bit more tilted. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to click like this, and you're going to see it actually tries to stay inside of the picture. That's pretty cool. That's definitely helping me out, right? So I can kind of push my composition so that, I think it'd be cooler if it was actually like trying to go up that direction, right? So I'm going to go like that, and then I'll just hit, and make sure it's so 6x9 or 9x6 by 300, right? And then I'll hit enter, enter, give it a second, there. Okay, so I think that looks a little bit better. Now, another thing you might want to do, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to undo it because I don't really like it, is when you took your shot, one of the ways you can kind of make something like automatically go to abstract is just rotate the picture. So if I go to image, and then go to image rotation, you can go 9 degrees clockwise. Now it's a landscape, right? I could go image rotation, 180. I don't know what arbitrary is, but I'm just gonna go back 90 clockwise. You can also flip it. So if you take a photo and let's say it's like kind of like a landscapey thing, like it's kind of like like water. You see them do this with trees and stuff where they have reflections of water. You could just flip it upside down, and then all of a sudden people lose the perspective of what they're looking at. So that's a nice little trick that you could try to do in order to kind of to help that. Okay. Okay, so now we've got this thing here. Okay, so I think generally it looks pretty good, but we could enhance it in some way. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go over here. And so before when we did this, we did image adjustments, and we did all these in here. But if you remember, these are destructive because they literally apply to this. We have other options where we could use these adjustment layers here, okay? And there's also, these adjustment layers are also right here. So you'll notice there's this bar down here. So far all we've used is the trash and to make the new one. There's also folders, which, you know. And then there's these three here. So I'm going to show you what basically this one is in this video. Okay, so this is basically adjustment layers. So they do what's up there, but they're non-destructive. It puts a layer over top of it, and that's how it works. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down real quick, just so that you know what they all are. But I would suggest, you know, looking up, but you're going to want to play around with them in order to kind of get a feel for them. So maybe, you know, take like, I don't know, half an hour, and just go through and just play with them and see what they do. And that's really kind of the best way to understand it, especially with something like this, because we don't have a goal of like, I want to make this person pop. You have an abstract piece, so it's kind of free form. So anyways, the first one, solid color, does literally what the name suggests. It just puts a color as an adjustment layer above it. Okay. So that's really not super helpful in this, but that's what that one does. And then after that, it's gradient. So it does, again, the same thing, but it puts a gradient over it. So in this case, you can say I have this gradient. You can choose different gradients here, right? Oops, cancel. I can choose the angle in which they're coming. So like that, right? And if you want to, like, let's say you have these options, you don't like any of those. If you double click on this, it'll pop open this, and then you can start to adjust it. So to adjust it from here, what you do is you click on the color here, you can click on it, you can double click it here, or just click on this. And then, you know, put some color in there, right? And do the same thing here. The top ones represent the alpha, or the opacity. So if you click on the top one, you can change it here. So I could lower this so it goes to like semi-transparent, right? And I got this cool, almost looks like a, I don't know, like a Instagram filter. You can add stops by clicking in here, right? And then I can take this color and make this, I don't know, whatever, like that, right? And if you want to get rid of it, you just pull it out. So that's stuff you can do. You can also, and this is pretty cool, so you see it says type solid. You can also do noise, which I think is pretty fun. And then you can just, let's see. It's not really, I don't really like the noise of this one. Anyway, so you can do the noise as well. Let's go back to solid. Is it giving me that? No. It takes your initial color into account. So anyway, you could also do that, and that's kind of cool. So those are your options. You can add transparency to it, so on and so forth, right? So I'm just going to hit OK. We'll hit OK. And then what I could do afterwards is you could take like the opacity, so the transparency of that layer down. Or we're going to go into this a little bit later. You could try these layer blending modes. So darken, linear burn, these different ones, so they overlay over top of it, like so. Okay. All right. So that's gradient fill. The next one is pattern. Literally, it does what the other ones do, but it does it based on a pattern. So it'll overlay a pattern. So in this case, it's using this trees one. So you can click and there's these different folders. There's trees. That's a bit different than it used to be. So grass. Oh, that's kind of cool. They have grass. Water. Let's say we go with this guy, right? You can change the scale so it'll repeat. You can make it bigger or smaller. Okay, so, but obviously as you get smaller, these are raster images, so they will get pixelized after a while. And link to layer, that just means like if you move or rotate or whatever, this layer here, the one that it's attached to, it will correspondingly do so. Okay. Again, so that is obviously it just puts it over top of it. So again, you'd want to use like these various things here, right? So like that's kind of cool, but not really. We're gonna get rid of it. Okay, so that's what that one does. So these first three kind of just put a picture over top of it, really. So you could just do that, make a new layer and slap it on. So I don't find it too helpful, but I just wanted you to know what they are. Brightness contrast does literally what the name suggests. So you can adjust the brightness here, and you can adjust the contrast here, right? So I'm sure you probably know what those mean. They also, you'll see a lot of these will have either presets or they'll have like auto buttons. So if you click auto, it's going to automatically adjust the settings, and it, and should hopefully be better. Now, if I want to see, you can see what it did. I didn't really show this earlier, but what it does is it basically puts the effect on there, and then it puts this. Okay, so this white image is actually a mask. We'll go more into masks later on. But basically everything that's white, and since it has an entire white layer, that's what it's showing here, will have that effect applied to it. So just to give you an idea, if I select this white here, and I use the brush, if I paint black, it's going to remove it. If you look over here, hopefully you see the black. So it's only applying it to where there's white. And if I paint white instead, right, kind of see it'll update there. That's where it's applying. It's just so you understand what that is. We'll cover how to work with those later, but for now, that's what that is. Okay, so it does brightness contrast. That's fabulous. Okay, let's do the next one. Levels, okay? So basically, it allows you to do the shadows, midtones, and the highlights, okay? And this histogram, that's what they call this, basically represents that in the image, okay? So if you take this and go to the right, you're going to make the image brighter, because basically you're saying that this is white, and you're saying white now starts here. So everything that was over here, right? So white should have been right here. Everything that here now is white. And you can see it kind of blew out some of the sections. And this does the same thing. So this is where black starts. That's where the 0 value is. And if I go this way, now black starts right here, okay? And then if we adjust the midtones, you'll see that that will shift everything in between kind of one way or the other, okay? You can also directly change it here. So you can take your, like, this is black, this one represents black, and this one represents white. So if I take black, I'm like, now I made black gray, right? So now there is not any deep black, and I can take white and make white this. Which honestly, you probably don't want to do, because if you do that, most of the time when you're trying to do an image, sometimes you don't, but most of the time you're trying to get absolute black to absolute white. You want the full spectrum of value, okay? So value being lightness and darkness. Again, this has an auto button. I can click on that, and it does have these things. But literally all they're doing is they're just putting specific increments of shifting it over, which you could just as easily do. So I wouldn't bother with those. Just go back to default. But you could click on auto, and it might bump it up, and I'm just going to turn it off and on. And you see, right? Makes it look a little bit better, I would say. All right. Now, what you're going to notice, too, I'm just going to go ahead and throw that one away. Let's go back here again. For the most part, they start simpler and they get more complicated, and some of the tools kind of do the same thing, but a little bit better, right? So, like, the brightness contrast had 2 sliders, real easy. The levels, right, was kind of like a level above that, right? So now we're going to do curves, which is basically a level above levels. Pun intended. All right, so what we're going to have here is you have the same kind of slider situation, okay? And we've been doing curves anyway, where I can do the same thing, but now I can also, adjust this. So there's like a vertical component, okay? Right, so generally you can adjust these back and forth. I can clip it here. I can also take this. So this, I'm going to click and drag this off. That's how you get rid of if you create a point you don't want. You can create as many points as you desire, or just pull them off. Yoink. Yoink. Okay. I can take this and I can drag this down. You're going to see it affects the whole spectrum. And now white is only this dark, right? So it's kind of like levels, but it adds this vertical component to it as well. So now my black starts up here, and it's white. So it's similar, but it gives you a little bit more control. You can also adjust, so you can see I'm on RGB right here. You can also adjust like just the red levels, the brightness and darkness of them, right? So I could like take this down, and it's going to pull my red out, right? But for the most part, I would just stick with RGB. And again, there's also an auto button, right? So if I do auto, you're going to see that really bumps it, right? You can see, boop. Okay. I'm going to turn that one off for now, but I'm going to keep it because I'll probably just use it. Let's go ahead and do another one. So we did, where are we? Okay. Exposure is just meant to basically mimic like if you're taking a photo. So when you take a photo, you might have probably said it earlier, but you're exposing the film, or if you're using a camera, it's the CDC, charge coupling device. Charge coupling, CCD, sorry. The CCD, the sensor that's absorbing the light. Okay, so you expose it, and that's how it works. So this is meant to kind of mimic that. More or less, if you do the exposure up, it's going to bump the highlights kind of first, and then it's going to bleed into the rest. Okay. So it's not just broadly brightening it, it kind of does the highlights a little bit more. And then gamma correction is kind of the opposite, where it'll affect the shadows first and kind of bleed in. And then gamma is basically the mid-tone equivalent, right? So if you take this, usually it'll bump the contrast up more, or less. You can see it kind of gets gray and it kind of gets more contrasty. So that's kind of what that's for. Again, it has these presets. I thought I had an auto button. I guess it doesn't. All right. So that one's good. I like using that one just because I feel like that one's real quick and easy. If I need to take a picture and make it absolutely white or absolutely black, I usually just use exposure because I can just yank it. Because even the brightness contrast, if you up it all the way, like the contrast, you can't actually get like absolute. Okay, so let's do the next one here. What did we just do? Okay, so Vibrance, this is another one. Make sure, so you see how I have this layer selected? It's going to apply Vibrance to this layer. I got to make sure I'm on this one, okay? So I have this one selected. And if for any reason too, also, let's say you did it, you're like, oh, I wish I had it back. You see how the properties panel came up? But if I wasn't on it, if you just double click on the little icon, it'll pop it open in a window or something. So you can always come back to it. I can always change it again. So that's the whole point, is that this is non-destructive. I can turn it off, I can throw it away, I can do whatever. It's not actually changing the image. So you can jumble and mix and do all these things with these. Okay? So all right, so let's grab this, make sure you're on that one. And then Vibrance. Vibrance is kind of like Hue Saturation, but it doesn't go as far. You're going to see the next one, I think, is Hue Saturation, which gives you more control, but it's a lot easier to, like, do too much. Okay, so basically, there is saturation in this one as well. Watch, if I saturate this, which means it's going to add more color, it's not too terrible, actually, because this is kind of a blue picture. Vibrance, this would be more obvious if I had a picture of a person. It'll kind of do a similar thing. It'll just bump it up a little bit. So what I would tell you to do is to use Vibrance first before you do anything else. And then I'm just going to go all the way up because I want my picture, like, you know, in there. And then if you want to go a little bit farther, so look at this as like a lesser version and then like the more version. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn that one off. I'm going to keep that one on as well. I'm going to go here. And then Hue Saturation is what Vibrance does, but it gives you even more control, basically. So I can shift the hue of the picture itself by going like this, right? Now, if you're trying to shift it and it's not doing that much, you can click on Colorize, and that will like really make it like tinted, okay? So that's always an option. Then saturation obviously is the amount, so you can see you can go way too far with this, and then there's lightness. So now it is possible to grab the different colors and then push them. So I could say, oh, I want to take my reds. Let me grab. Yeah, I have reds. There's like reds in here. Actually, do we have magenta? I'm gonna grab my magentas because right in here is kind of magenta-y. I could take those, and let's say I just want to make them brighter. I could punch this up. That's way too much. But now it's targeting the magentas specifically, and I could push that, right? Or I'd be like, oh, they're too much. I could bring them down. So you can actually go here, and if you see a color it's like too much or whatever, you can actually pull it back by using this as well, or shift it if you need to. Right, so maybe my magentas, let me saturate so you can see them. I'd be like, oh, they should be more this color, right? So I could do that. So there's a lot of control here, but you do deal with the problem of it. Like, it's too easy to, like, ruin the picture. You probably noticed, like, in the earlier ones, I've usually gone too far. It's because I'm trying to show you what the tools are, and also I'm just terrible. But generally, it's better, I would say, when you're adjusting, especially, like, people photos, to not go far enough than to go too far. Like, if you're going to err, you usually want to err on the side of less, right? Okay, so like makeup or something. Way too many people wear way too much makeup. But you put a little on, it helps a little bit, but it ain't ruining things, right? So let's click on this. Hue Saturation, okay, color balance, okay? So basically what it does is it targets the shadows, midtones, and highlights, and then you can shift them, right? So I would say these are my shadow areas, right? So I'll go to my shadows and be like, I wish they were more red for some reason. I could go like this. See, the problem is I don't have like a lot of light and dark. It will try to shift my red. I can shift my reds into, or sorry, my shadows into that range, right? Can I undo that? Okay, good. And then I'm going to go to, let's try highlights, because maybe that's a little bit more obvious. Let's say I want my highlights to be red. There you go. So now you can see how like it's taking the highlights and it's applying red to them, or I want to go make them a little more green. You can go through and it's going to target these different areas. So it's one of those things where you could take, like, let's say you take a photo of somebody and there's like, generally shadows are black, right? Or blackish, dark. So what you could do is you could target those and then maybe shift them blue, and you can get kind of a neat look. So you can try playing around with that if you want. I'm not going to use that here. All I'm going to use really are those for this, because it doesn't really need that much. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Here, and let me see, we just did color balance. Okay, black and white is going to make it a black and white picture. But what it does, there's a couple ways to do this. You could actually go to image desaturate, is image adjustments desaturate, and that just takes right here, takes the color out, okay? But leaves the value, leaves the light dark. This instead is also the adjustments version. What it does is it lets you determine how the colors themselves are represented as black and white, okay? So for instance, this picture is pretty much blue. So if I adjust this slider, it's going to make the picture really bright, right? But if you look, there was no yellow in it, I don't think. So if I adjust this, you can see it doesn't do that much. It's kind of targeting in here. So this is super useful, particularly, again, if you have a person in your photo, because, you know, they'll typically be in this range, right? Kind of this kind of color. You can adjust these and you can make the person like brighter or darker, right? Or if you have photos of fish and they're all orange, you could, like, again, use these two. Or you want to take the grass, you know, grass is generally green, at least on the other side, and you could just, you know, lighten and darken that green, okay? So that's the idea behind it. Yeah, okay. And you can also tint with it too. So, but that's the so if you do like tint, it'll actually, you could choose the color here, click on that, and then you can, instead of it being black and white, it will do a tint. All right. Okay. Oops, we're not doing that. Sorry, not this one anyway. Yeah, photo filter. So photo filter, we already kind of played around when we did the adjustments before, but basically it's like applying a gel to your lights. So if you've ever done any photography, basically you can take your light and you could put cellophane over it. There's different colored gels, but basically it's different colored clear plastic. You can put over the light and it'll make it blue or make it orange or whatever. The idea here is that this will allow us to basically add a warming filter or a cooling filter, and then you also can just do colors, and then you could adjust, you know, how much of it there is. You can actually just change the color too. Those are just presets. That's what that's for. So that might be helpful to you. Boop. And let's see, we did photo filter, channel mixer. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to, you'll see we have our RGB. So when we're working on the computer, we're working RGB, right? So all of our colors, all of our pixels are represented by red, green, and blue, okay? So what this does is it allows us to determine how each one of those channels is represented, right? So right now on the red channel, it's 100%. If I wanted, I don't have any red in here, but if I wanted to make it more, I could pump this up. But you see how it gets like a little warning? You don't want to go above 100% total. So now this channel is going more than it should, so I have to back off some. So what I could do is back off of blue here, like that, and now it's 100. And now I made the red more represented, right? Or I could take this green and pump that up of all of the, you know. Okay, that's fine. Next one. Color. Is that the one? Yeah. So this, I don't use this, but basically it kind of adds an effect to it. So you see there's different options here, but basically you could choose like a crisp winter look. And it's, well, see, it's not going to show much. I really should have used a different. It's basically going to apply like a filter onto it, like an effect, and it's going to give it this appearance, kind of like an Instagram filter. It's basically like that. So you could try it, but you don't really have a lot of control over it, so I don't use it, but that's what it's for. I guess if you've done any video editing, I think they have similar stuff in the video editors. It's basically the same thing as that, so if you're familiar with that, you can do the same thing here. But I don't suggest generally using it. Invert does literally what the name suggests. There's not even any settings. It just takes the picture and does the opposite. So black becomes white, and red becomes green. Probably not green because it's RGB. Whatever it would be the opposite here, probably yellow? I don't know. But it becomes, inverts the picture. Okay, so that's great. That one's exciting. Posterize. So what this is going to do is it's going to take the picture basically and limit the color. What it does is that you see us has 4 levels. There's more than 4 levels of color. There's more than 4 colors here. It's levels per channel. So if it's 4, again, we're using RGB. So if it's 4, that means that there are 12 colors in here total. So if I break this down to, let's say, 2, now there are 6 colors. And you can click in here and just use your arrows. Maybe not. Thought I could. Maybe I can click on this and use arrows. No. All right. You might have an easier time just trying to type in numbers. But once you go too high, like once you go to like, I don't know, here, you can see you can't even tell anymore. But basically, it's just going to break it down into fewer and fewer variations of color. It honestly just makes it look like it has compression. I don't find it too useful, but if you're trying to limit the number of colors, like maybe you're trying to take something and put it on a shirt and you don't want to have a lot of colors to silkscreen, I can see it having value in that way. All right, so we'll get rid of that guy. Posterize Threshold makes it absolute white and absolute black, and you can determine where it gets divided right here. So again, this is the histogram. So we're saying everything on the right of this is going to be white, and everything on the left of this is going to be black. And so you could choose, like, oh, I'm going to make everything almost white, except for this little nublet here. And then over here, make everything black, but this little bit here. Okay, so that's what it does. I think it looks pretty neat, but it's very harsh. You can see it's pixelated. So. And next, gradient map. So what this one does, it's kind of neat. Basically, it allows you to take the image, kind of almost like it's black and white, and you're going to take everything that's black and make it this color, and everything white is that color, and then it replaces it with that. So basically, black will become red here, and white becomes this cream color. But I could choose, now black is this purple color. And I could go here too. You can do multiple stops. So basically, black is now blue, midtones are red, and the highlights are yellow, right? And it gives this kind of gives it like a neat, like solarized look, right? So it's kind of cool. I have a feeling if you use this in conjunction with other things, you could probably get like a really neat effect. So you might want to explore it. I haven't really used it a lot, but I could see it being pretty cool. Pun intended. Okay, so let's do gradient map and then selective color. So basically, allows us to do kind of like hue saturation of those other ones here, but we can also do our whites and blacks. So I could say like my blacks, I want to shift them more to, and this also is CMYK, so it's more like print. But I could do more cyan, so it'll make them more, or actually that's less cyan, sorry. So let's say I don't want to make them, right? But let's say I want to make them super cyan. So now my blacks will be represented by cyan. And magenta and yellow, which basically won't do anything. Anyway, so yeah, let you grab. So, oops. Let's say I want to grab. I don't have any greens. Let's do blues, right? So my blue to come down and have it more represented by magenta and not yellow. It's not really doing too much, but oh yeah, I'd go up the other way. Anyway, but that's what that does too. Okay. So that is basically all of the filters. So you have 2 options. Sorry, that's a long video. You have 2 options with this. So you're going to bring in your abstract photo. I want you to crop it, fix any kind of fixes you need to make. Then I want you to apply adjustment layers. So this curve is too much. Come down. Go a little. Apply these adjustment layers, and if you're happy and you know it, you can clap your hands and be like, that's good. That's good enough for the one picture, okay? If you're not happy with it and you want to try mixing it with another photo, I'm going to show you how to do that for your abstract, okay? And then we'll do the text one. But I'm going to end this video here. Hopefully you got a good idea of what the adjustment layers do and roughly how to manipulate them. Yeah, okay.